In this video, we're going to take a look at a pink ink by Pilot in their Iroshizuku line, Kosumosu or Cosmos. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Also, down in the description is a link to the pink ink playlist, so if you want to see more of them, you can find that there. I'm an ink guy, and let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub. With no feather spread, halo sheen, it does have moments of shading, like quick. The K in quick is dark. The word the is much darker than what's around it. Lazy goes darker to lighter. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is lighter than the extra fine. With no feather spread, halo sheen, it does show some shading. Like brown gets darker to lighter. Fox goes lighter to darker. 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show good color variation, and we are getting that in the writing. And the smear test, yes, you could recover it if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then, a Sailor 1911 Pro Gear Slim with a fine nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 8 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade at 15 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both are showing a tiny bit of color variation, but it's not coming through in the writing. And the smear test, you're not going to recover if you smear while you're writing, so don't do it. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put in the water for 10 to 15 seconds, and we see that pink working its way up. Now, the interesting part of what's really going on is along the top, there's that pink, but right underneath you see this kind of orange tone. So it looks to me that we've got a bit of a mix going on here that I was really not expecting. Now, the one on the right that's let dry for 10 minutes before it's put in the water, it does form the slightest bit of a line at the bottom, which is the major difference between the two, but I'm really not expecting any kind of resistance for this ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 5 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, little darker I think than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. I think the shading here looks very nice. Brown goes darker to lighter. Lazy goes darker to lighter. Dog goes light to dark. 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show color variation, although it really only comes through in the medium. And the smear test, you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it actually performs fairly well. There's no major blowout that's going on, so it's completely readable. You could feel safe using this in a note-taking situation if you want to go back and highlight. Water is reactivating and lifting quite a bit of this ink, but not all of the ink. Now, it was only 30 seconds, but there is still some of this pink bonded with the paper. Pen flush did everything that water did and nothing more, and the 1/3 bleach solution is completely obliterating it. The really good news here is that it only took water to get it out of my pen. The next writing sample is done on Apica CD notebooks. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, some light shading, like in Iroshizuku, the H looks a bit darker than what's right around it. In Kosumo, the U looks a little bit darker than what's around it, but there's not a ton here. The extra fine is a little lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, only a few spots of shading. The looks darker than what's around. The Q and the K in quick are darker than the rest of the word. The PS in jumps a little bit darker, just some spots. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, decent shading. Quick goes darker to lighter to darker. Brown goes darker, lighter, darker. Jumps goes lighter to darker. 11 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show good color variation, and we are getting it in the writing. And the smear test, you could recover it, but it's being very light there, so there's a maybe recover it if you smear while you're writing. Maybe. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, and the realm of normal was 2.1 to 2.9. Iroshizuku's Kosumosu has a viscosity of 2.51, making it normal and almost average. Now, if you're interested in how the viscosity tests and all that stuff's done, then down in the description is a link to that video. But right now, let's take a look at the next writing sample done on Leuchtturm 1917 paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub, just a little, with no feather spread, halo sheen, spots of shading. The is darker than everything around it. B in brown is darker than the rest of the word, like K in quick is darker than the rest of the word. 5 seconds to dry. Medium is the darkest tone on the page with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. Lost some of my words there. 9 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show tiny bits of color variation, although I only think it comes through in the extra fine. And the smear test, I don't think you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, and the realm of normal was 13 to 21 seconds. Iroshizuku's Kosumosu, or Cosmos, has an average dry time of 9 seconds, making this a very fast-drying ink. The last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper. Now, there's a lot of ghosting that's occurring in all of the writing, and there is some very deep bleed, which is what I'm looking at in these spots. This deep bleed into the paper was not a bleed through the paper. So you couldn't use the back of the page because you risk losing everything just by this amount we see with the extra fine. Although maybe a drier extra fine and you could get away with it, but I wouldn't. The medium at the top has tiny feathering all over it. It has a little bit of spread, but it's not out of control. It has no halo sheen, no shade. I don't see this as the end of the world up here. The extra fine is a lighter tone than the medium. It does have tiny feathering. It does have a little bit of spread to about a fine. Again, everything I see here is not horrible, though, and not something to stop you from using the paper. 1 second to dry. Scrubby shows some color variation, though there's none in the writing. In a smear test, you could definitely recover it because you can't smear it. Instead of finding inks that look like Iroshizuku's Cosmos, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went with a nice blue-black ink by Callifolio Byzance. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Iroshizuku's Cosmos? Here is a perfect pink tone. It doesn't seem to shade a bunch, but here I don't need it. Look at how good this looks from a dry fine. Just a showstopper of a color. Definitely worth a bottle. So what nib and pen give the best writing experience from this ink? I do think it's a dealer's choice in that I think it always looks good. However, for me, a dry fine really put down the most pleasant tone, even though it always looks good. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at Ackerman's No. 2 Resident Blau.